So let's get switch 3 to join the topology, but I'm not going to change the configuration of these links. At the moment, show interface gigabit 01 switch port shows us that this port here is configured to use dynamic auto. At the moment it's using static access. Switch 1 will therefore not initiate trunking with switch 3. And what about gigabit 02 on switch 2? Show interface gigabit 02 switch port. This port is also enabled for dynamic auto. In other words, it won't initiate trunking with switch 3. So let's start up switch 3 and see if switch 3 learns about the VLANs through DTP. So switch 3 is booting up. The only thing I'll do is configure a name. So host switch 3. Show VTP status. The domain name is null. Domain name hasn't been configured on the switch. Number of existing VLANs is 5. Revision number is 0. Show VLAN brief. Switch has the default VLANs. It doesn't show the additional VLANs in the list, and that's because no interfaces have been configured for trunking. So show interfaces trunk. To give you the full version, no trunks have been configured, and that's because the command show interface gigabit 00 switch port shows us that the switch is using dynamic auto, not dynamic desirable. So it's not negotiating to form trunking with switch 1 or switch 2. So on switch 2, let's configure gigabit 01 statically for trunking and see what happens. So switch port trunk encapsulation .1q switch port mode trunk. Do show run interface gigabit 01. We have statically configured this port to trunk. On this side, show interfaces trunk. It's negotiated automatically with the remote side to set up trunking. So I configured trunking on this side. DTP is still running, however, so it sends a DTP message to this switch to form a trunk. If you're not sure about DTP, have a look at the dynamic trunking protocol section of this course, or the DTP videos where I show you more detail about DTP. So show VTP status on switch 3. Notice the domain has changed to CCNA. Number of existing VLANs is 10. Configuration revision has changed to 7. Show VLANs brief. The switch has learnt about the relevant VLANs, but notice gigabit 01, this port, is still in VLAN 1. VTP does not put ports into VLANs, it simply synchronizes the VLAN database. So switch 3 has learnt about the VLANs from switch 1. We should, however, configure this port as a trunk port in our topology. Show interface trunk at the moment shows us that only gigabit 00. In other words, this link is configured for trunking. So what I'll do is I'll configure them both manually. So switch port trunk encapsulation .1q switch port mode trunk, and interface gigabit 02, this port, switch port trunk encapsulation .1q switch port mode trunk. Show interface trunk. Both these ports have been manually configured or statically configured for trunking using 802.1q. Now this switch is a server in the same way that the other switches are servers. That's the default mode. Now you don't want all your switches to be VTP servers, because changes on any switch could affect all other switches. You typically only want your core devices to be VTP servers, or perhaps select switches in your topology. So what we'll do here is change the VTP mode to client. Notice the mode is changed to client, show VTP status. We can see that the mode is client now. Now, how does that affect things? Notice when we try to create a VLAN, let's say VLAN 8, we cannot add the VLAN in the current mode. Show VLAN brief. We've got VLANs 1 to 6 here, but if we try and configure any other VLAN, it's not allowed. We can also not edit other VLANs. So we can't do any configuration changes on the VLAN database because the switch is operating as a client. However, on switch 1, show VLAN brief, if we added another VLAN, VLAN 7 and VLAN 8 for argument's sake, this switch will learn about those VLANs. Because it's a client, it will still synchronize to other switches. So you can see the configuration revision number has changed. Show VLAN brief. There's a VLAN 7 and 8. And let me make this point because I made that mistake there. When you create VLAN 9, it's not going to synchronize. You have to type exit or type end to get that VLAN added to the database. And now that information is propagated to other switches in the topology. So servers update clients. Clients can't add VLANs to the VLAN database, but as I'll show you in a moment, clients can update servers. So you need to be careful with VTP clients.